Medieval Europe ran on a cycle of constant regime change. Dynasties fractured, peasant revolts burned through crop yields, and borders shifted with every succession crisis. In economic terms, this warfare was thermodynamic waste. Capital requires predictable conditions to compound, and the volatility of a medieval civil war instantly destroyed the physical infrastructure and trust required for long-distance trade. Yet one state engineered an institutional system to bypass this cycle entirely, surviving for 1,000 years without succumbing to a single dynastic collapse. The power center of the Venetian Republic did not operate like a royal court. It was constructed and run as a strictly insulated, soundproofed corporate boardroom. The architecture of this stability was finalized in 1297 with a constitutional provision known as the Serrata del Maggior Consiglio, the lockout of the Great Council. The legislation permanently restricted future membership in the council exclusively to men who had already served or their direct patrilineal descendants. It explicitly targeted the homini novi, the upstarts. A merchant who suddenly acquired immense wealth could no longer buy his way into the ruling class. The state enforced this demographic isolation by compiling the Golden Book, a strict, formalized registry tracking the exact bloodlines of eligible candidates. The Serrata executed a bloodless bureaucratic coup. It formalized the Republic as a closed corporation, locking the existing aristocrats in as permanent primary shareholders. Modern economic analysis allows us to track the exact macroeconomic toll this political lockout exacted on Mediterranean trade. Before 1297, Venice relied heavily on the collegenza, a traditional joint stock contract. This legal mechanism allowed merchants, tradesmen, and ordinary citizens to pool their capital and share the massive profits of overseas merchant voyages. This chart shows a timeline of trade contract participation from 1250 to 1350. Precisely at the 1297 marker, non-aristocratic involvement in long-distance trade drops to near zero. Simultaneously, the data tracks a severe inverse spike in extreme wealth concentration among the newly isolated patrician class. Minor aristocrats and plebeians were entirely severed from the most profitable economic engines of the city. This stratification consolidated all military and economic resources into a single, unified block of shareholders. By stripping the opposition of trade capital and excluding them from power, the Republic neutralized the primary drivers of ulternal regime change. By perfectly aligning the personal capital of the ruling class with the survival of the Republic, Venice permanently eliminated the friction of upward political ambition. There is a persistent assumption that the Doge of Venice operated as a royal sovereign. His actual constitutional mandate was entirely different. The Doge was a heavily constrained chief executive officer, legally subordinate to a board of directors. The 1268 electoral regulations codified a mechanical system engineered entirely to prevent any single influential family from installing a puppet executive. 30 council members were reduced to 9. They selected 40, reduced to 12. The algorithm escalated. 12 selected 25, reduced to 9, who elected 45. Finally, they were reduced to 11, who ultimately chose the final 41 electors. Within that final committee of 41, at least 25 votes were required to appoint the executive. Patricians spent weeks navigating this mathematically exhausting system, completely isolated from the public during the deliberations. This convoluted sorting mechanism diluted individual influence. It yielded an isolated, neutral figurehead rather than a powerful autocrat. Upon taking office, the Doge swore to uphold the promissione ducale, a strictly enforced restrictive contract. He faced constant administrative surveillance. He couldn't open foreign dispatches alone. He couldn't possess any foreign property, and leaving the city required permission. The Republic aggressively protected against dynastic ambition. The Doge possessed zero authority to name a successor or associate any family member with his office. His duties were overwhelmingly ceremonial, like the marriage to the sea. The public grandeur was a ritualistic illusion, hiding a total lack of operational control. Accountability extended past his lifetime. Upon a Doge's death, a specialized commission of inquisitors passed strict judgment on his entire tenure. If the commission discovered any malfeasance or overreach during his reign, his estate was aggressively fined and stripped of its wealth. The Doge was engineered as an executive liability sink. He acted as a gilded scapegoat to absorb public blame, while the council retained absolute authority. In 1310, a nobleman named Bajamante Tiepolo attempted a coup, putting the locked-down corporate structure to a critical stress test. The conspiracy failed, but it forced the Republic to recognize the need for a permanent division dedicated to managing constitutional crimes and internal threats. They established the Council of Ten, an internal audit division that treated constitutional crimes as lethal threats to the corporate interest. The council did not waste resources policing the peasantry. They directed their surveillance upward, aggressively monitoring the executive patrician class. The state gathered intelligence on its own shareholders using an anonymous reporting infrastructure, collecting tips through stone slots built directly into the city walls. The council possessed a clear mandate. If a patrician became too popular, too ambitious, or threatened the state's profit margins, they were quietly eliminated. The Council of Ten ensured the corporation's survival by aggressively pruning rogue billionaires who prioritized their personal ego over institutional stability. This political lockdown financed a massive physical engine. The Republic's stability poured capital directly into the Arsenale, a sprawling, state-owned industrial complex. Through the Arsenale, the government maintained central control over the mass production of warships and merchant vessels for 8 consecutive centuries. This combined industrial and political machine gave Venice the capacity to conquer and manage a maritime empire spanning the Adriatic and the Mediterranean. The Republic maintained sovereign, continuous operations from the year 697 until 1797. When the state finally fell to Napoleon's France, the event resembled the hostile takeover and dissolution of a millennium-old firm rather than a standard military defeat. Even facing annihilation, the Venetian patricians maintained their corporate pragmatism. They systematically voted to abdicate rather than see their city burned to the ground in a feudal resistance. The Venetian Republic maintained its sovereign structure for 11 centuries by ruthlessly engineering a system where the machinery of the state remained supreme, and the ego of the individual was systematically erased.